a door swinging open at 2 in the morning, a sensor mounted above the frame that just quietly logged it, a number on a federal survey that follows the hospital straight into its next Medicare payment. Those three things are connected by the same thread, and it has almost nothing to do with your medication schedule. Most people walk into a hospital assuming the wake-ups are strictly clinical, the meds, the chart, whatever order got typed in. That's the story everybody carries in. It's not that simple, and once you see what's actually behind those interruptions, you'll start asking hospital staff a completely different set of questions than the ones you came in with. Before I get into it, if the kind of thing that's actually driving hospital decisions versus what gets said out loud at the bedside is useful to you, that's exactly what this channel keeps digging into. Sticking around means you catch the next one of these before your own next stay, not after it. Here's where it actually starts. There's a single question on the government's Hospital Patient Experience Survey, Quiet at Night, and it has been the lowest scoring question on that entire survey nationwide since 2007. That's not a minor footnote. That score feeds directly into a program called Hospital Value-Based Purchasing, where Medicare grades a hospital's overall performance 30% on patient experience and 70% on clinical quality, and then adjusts what it pays the hospital based on that grade. A hospital that scores badly on quiet nights gets money withheld. A hospital that scores well gets rewarded. So, somewhere in a finance office, not a nursing station, there is a person whose job includes caring, in dollar terms, whether you slept through the night. And yet, it keeps happening anyway. Which raises the obvious next question: if the money points one direction, what's still pulling the other way? Some of it is quite literally the building. The Facility Guidelines Institute publishes the acoustic construction standards that determine how well a patient room's walls and doors block sound, a rating called STC, Sound Transmission Class. And those standards have been adopted, in full or in part, into building code in more than 40 states. But adoption isn't uniform, and it isn't old. Oklahoma didn't require the newer, stricter version of that code until 2018, when its minimum sound isolation rating jumped from 45 to 50. Texas, as of the most recent reporting on this, hadn't adopted the standard at all. It's not a broken policy keeping that door loud at 2 a.m. It's a construction spec, signed off in a year and a state you never chose, sitting in the walls around you. That's a slower-moving problem than most hospitals can fix room by room. Which is exactly why the more interesting fight against this is happening somewhere else entirely, in what hospitals are now measuring and what they're starting to replace with machines. Some hospitals have started literally counting how many times your door opens overnight. One children's hospital ran a quality project using entry sensors and found rooms were being entered an average of 10 times a night before anyone changed anything. After they adjusted order sets and added a rounding checklist, that number dropped to under 7. That's a hospital treating your sleep as a countable metric instead of an abstract complaint, which is new and worth knowing exists. Here's something else worth sitting with. Research out of the UK looking at when vital sign checks actually get delayed found that early morning and evening checks are the ones least likely to be pushed back. Not because they're more medically urgent, but because there's simply less competing for a nurse's attention at those hours. In other words, a delayed nighttime check isn't a sign you've been deprioritized. It's a reflection of everything else happening on the floor that hour, which has nothing to do with you personally. And there's something coming that goes further than scheduling. Researchers trained a computer model built on more than 2 million hospital admissions and 26 million vital sign readings, specifically to predict which patients are stable enough that a routine overnight vitals check can be safely skipped altogether. One health system running across 8 hospitals has already gone a step further and deployed a wearable patch, cleared by the FDA, that continuously tracks heart rate, breathing, and skin temperature and streams it to a monitoring team around the clock, rolled out across roughly 2,700 non-ICU beds, with more than 95% of eligible patients actually wearing it. For a lot of patients on those units, the version of checking on you that used to mean a hand on your wrist at 3 a.m. simply doesn't happen anymore. And the sleep gains from just rethinking the schedule without any new technology at all are already measurable. One controlled trial that pushed back the earliest morning vitals round found patients gained 40 extra minutes of actual, objectively measured sleep, and their final wake-up time moved 30 minutes later. One large New York hospital system tracked its own quiet-at-night score, climbing nearly 5 points over 3 years, moving it up 30 percentile ranks nationally, and even noticed, almost by accident, that pandemic visitor restrictions shifted that number in ways nobody had planned for. One medical surgical unit built its own named overnight care program specifically aimed at giving patients 6 or more consecutive hours without interruption. None of this is theoretical. It's already running in real hospitals, on real units right now. So, if some hospitals are already doing this, measuring it, rebuilding around it, replacing the wake-up itself with a patch on your arm, what's your actual leverage if your hospital isn't one of them? This is the part almost nobody explains, and it matters more than it sounds like it should. There's a real difference between mentioning something to a nurse and formally complaining about it. A word to your nurse or unit manager typically stays inside the unit, useful, but it disappears once the shift ends. A formal grievance is different. It has to go to a designated committee, gets reported up to the hospital's governing board, and is supposed to be resolved on roughly a 7-day timeline, which creates a permanent record the hospital has to be able to produce later. And if the hospital brushes off even that, there's a federally contracted reviewer, completely separate from the hospital and separate from any hospital accreditation body, that Medicare patients can reach directly through 1-800-Medicare, specifically to have an outside party look at a quality of care complaint. Most families never learn that office exists unless they go looking for it. None of that has to come from confrontation either. Some of the more resourceful patients I've come across in family forums have worked out quiet, unofficial fixes on their own, leaving an IV arm resting palm down outside the blanket so a line could be checked without a full wake-up, for instance. And a detail that catches almost everyone off guard the first time. On a shared room, it's often your roommate's restlessness, not your own chart, deciding how much sleep you actually get that night, which has nothing to do with your medications at all. I'll say this plainly, because it's easy to miss in all of this. None of what I've walked through changes what your own doctor decides you actually need overnight. That stays a conversation between you and the people treating you. What I've laid out here is the system sitting around that decision. The incentives, the walls, the sensors, the part nobody hands you a pamphlet about. So the next time that door swings open at 2 in the morning, the useful question isn't, why me? It's whether that unit is one of the ones actually counting these interruptions, and if they're not, whether they're willing to start.